America's power grid is on the brink of collapse. Skyrocketing costs, blackouts, and government obsessed with green energy has us just on the point of failure. We're going to walk through some of the things that we're seeing out there with the PJM interconnect happening just today, even, and earlier this week, because the push for green policies and investment and the lack of investment in our energy grid is leading us to disaster. The stability of the power grid is coming under attack for a number of reasons. AI data centers are coming up like nobody's business, and they're super power hungry. We're going to expose the crisis. We're going to explain why it's happening and why you should care. All right, friends, let's get into it. Welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar. I'm an accountant by trade, and these are the things the mainstream media just won't cover. We'll also, if you stick around to the end, we'll also cover what you can do to protect yourself, some practical steps, some of which don't cost you nothing. All right, so let's get into it. The power grid is on the brink of collapse. And this is not something I say lightly, but it's the fact that we are having continuing issues, and those issues are not easily fixed. If they were easily fixed, they'd just fix them. But the problem is that we have so many power plants coming offline. They're taking down these coal-fired power plants. They're taking down these gas-fired power plants. They're taking down oil-fired power plants. And they're trying to replace them with these solar panels, and it's just not working. The PJM interconnect, which is America's largest power grid, serves 65 million people across 13 states and Washington, D.C. It also feeds power into Duke Energy down south and to the Midwest, as well as feeding the New England and New York kind of areas. The PJM interconnect this week has been issuing one after the next maximum generation load alerts. Basically saying, and they've been doing a bunch of these this year so far, is the fact that that they are requiring all of their power generation units be ready to be called up into service. They need them all to be ready to go because they are showing that the demand for power and the full max capacity of the power grid are getting closer and closer. And regulatory-wise, they have to keep enough generation capacity in order to keep the grid stable. If there's everyone suddenly goes on and turns on their air conditioners all at once, they need to be able to kind of cover that. And that's the situation we're at right now. Monitoring Analytics, Joe Bowering, says there's simply no new capacity to meet new loads. The grid has no spare capacity to handle the surging demand, especially from new AI data centers. Look at Loudoun County down in Virginia. This is called Data Center Alley. It's a global hub for data centers where we got Fort Meade down there. We got the NSA, but that's the NSA. And then we got, CIA has their headquarters down there too. We got a lot of data centers, including CISA, I think it's called, which is basically focusing on infrastructure defense, cyber attacks on infrastructure. And a bunch of these companies, agencies as well as companies, have their data centers right there in Loudoun County, Virginia. And they've been just eating up more and more power like nobody's business. And let me just walk you through how much of a power vampire these AI data centers really are. The AI data centers are booming, and they're driven by the need for advanced computing. So basically, they're shoving more and more power-hungry units into smaller and smaller spaces, and of course, this requires more and more cooling, which takes up a lot of power. But the new AI racks consume 120 kilowatts, double what the old models used to use. I mean, that's just a few years ago. So rack for rack, you're using up twice as much power, and that doesn't even take into effect the cooling. They're hyperscaling these data centers with thousands of racks being added even per day. So you can see how this is, we're rapidly expanding the demand for electricity, and we're not even talking about people plugging in their electric cars at home. That has added a lot of demand as well, because electric cars use up a lot of electricity. But that's started to slow. People adding new electric cars. Now it's starting to be where people are replacing their electric cars with electric cars. So that's kind of the situation there. But people are still adding more of that. And that's not to say that's inconsequential, but these AI data centers are just exploding. In the trillions of dollars of investment that are going into AI, that's what they're going into. They're going into programmers, but then they're really going into these data centers. So they're just building these data centers like nobody's business. It's not a coincidence that the most valuable company in the history of the world is NVIDIA, who makes the chips that are going into these data centers. The chips get stacked into these servers, and then they get put into the big data centers. It used to be where the data centers had a bunch of hard drives that they were storing information on. You still got those kind of centers, but now what they're going after is these crypto mining facilities as well as these AI facilities. They're not trying to store information, they're trying to process information rapidly and extremely fast. So the fossil fuel plants, which is the reliable baseload power for the power grid. We got the coal-fired power plants, we got the oil-fired power plants. These take a little bit of time to scale up, to crank up into power. The natural gas power plants are almost instantaneous. They can crank the power off of those up very, very quickly. But the oil-fired power plants have to be warmed up. Same thing with the coal-fired power plants. And we're shutting these things down because of green policies. Solar panels can't ramp up production. I mean, I guess you could pull the solar panels off and burn them for power, but that's not exactly what they're designed for, right? If the sun's shining, they're producing power. If the sun's not shining, they don't get power. If it's at nighttime, tough luck. If it's cloudy, tough. If there's a major hurricane coming through that's putting cloudiness over a large portion of the South all at once, you can just imagine that does havoc with the power grid. So we got that happening. The deep state data centers are hungry for power. And the years of Democratic leadership have pushed this aggressive decarbonization, the retiring of coal and gas power plants, and replacing them with wind and solar. But really, no one is replacing this base load power. You got your intermittent power, which ideally the intermittent power would go up when demand goes up. That's like a natural gas plant. You just kind of crank it up when you need it and you dial it back. It's like your stove at home, right? I mean, you don't run it when you don't need it, right? And the same way with the power plants, you kind of want to be able to dial them up when you need them and dial them back when you don't need them, right? But solar doesn't work that way. Neither does wind. So there's no replacement to baseload power except for new nuclear power plants, which have been facing a regulatory lockout, making it almost impossible to build a nuclear power plant in the United States anymore. Maryland, just the past couple months, has been facing regular rolling blackouts. This is partially due to some of the regulations that Maryland has in place. And, just earlier this year, Pennsylvania had to bail Maryland out, where Pennsylvania had to send Maryland a whole bunch of power in order to keep their grid from collapsing. These fragile grids from the mid-Atlantic to the Northeast just can't support the AI growth and the data centers that are going in, plus, of course, all the electric vehicles. And this is becoming a major national security risk. It's a risk to you, it's a risk to your family, it's a risk to everybody else in America. What happens when the power goes out in the U.S.? Not good things, right? Not good things. And not only that, but power bills are skyrocketing. PJM Interconnect's 2026 capacity auction. So they're auctioning off the capacity. So if you have a power plant and you're like, we want to sell the power, you sell the power like long before you actually generate it. So they're selling 2026 power to the PJM Interconnect, through the interconnect to the power units. So like if you have the power company that you are with, right? The power company you are with probably owns some power plants, but not necessarily. And if they see that with their power plants, they're going to have more demand than they need, they're going to power that by buying excess capacity from somebody else. Now, your power company might have too many power plants, and they're selling that excess capacity to other companies. But what looking at the numbers for 2026, the power capacity auction set a record high price at $329.17 per megawatt day. This is up from 2025's $269. So if you think that your electric bill is going to stay the same, probably not. Your electric bill is going to go up pretty significantly if you're here in Pennsylvania or anywhere in the PJM Interconnect. Plus, if your company buys power from PJM Interconnect, even though you're on a different interconnect nearby, that means that you're going to be hit with these prices too. So not just PJM, but neighboring power grids as well. So you got $16.1 billion in payouts to generators, up from $14.7 billion last year. So 2025, $14.7 billion going to people who have power plants. Next year, 16.1. It's going to be very lucrative to own a power plant because the demand for power is surpassing the capacity to generate that power. And so now they're fighting. They're trying to outbid each other in order to get that power, access to that power. And this is because, in a large part, due to the massive amount of data centers that they're putting in and the lack of grid updates. They are not putting in enough power lines, and the power lines that we have are like 70 years old. These things are old and ancient. Last year's 600% price increase on the PJM Interconnect led to a price cap, but these companies had to pay it to each other, but they weren't able to pass that on to the consumers. You better believe that they're going to be trying to recoup those losses over time. So these different power companies are cranking up the cost of electricity every year as much as they're allowed to legally. And if they are charging this and paying this, they're charging you this much for the power and they're paying this much for the power, we're moving fast towards a place where the power company is going to say, we're not buying power for you more expensive than what we're providing it to you. We're just not going to do that. We can't buy it. It just doesn't exist. Even though that capacity may exist, they may not provide it to you. Are you seeing kind of where this is going? They're going to shut you off because it costs too much to power you. Whereas the data centers are willing to pay that price because they're industrial and they're not protected like residential. This is a point where the industrial is going to be able to outbid the residential because residential rates have to stay low legally, but the industrial rates can go up and they're going to get that excess power before the houses. And the houses are going to get shut off power-wise, and the AI data centers are going to be powered so that the world can be continued to be taken over by the beast, right? So we got lack of investment in grid modernization and baseload power. That's a problem. Then we have the green agenda that's been making it less reliable. That's a second failure point there. Ignoring the need for stable power. The third failure that we're looking at is utilities are profiting more from selling power to the utilities, to the AI data centers and industrial demand than they are to residential, which means residential is going to get shut off. This can't be blamed on climate change. This is bad policies. We're seeing this in Europe, we're seeing this in the United States, and other countries have it figured out, but the United States isn't. Without action, we're going to have blackouts, we're going to have unaffordable bills, because they just won't make the investments necessary. So, personal impact, you may suffer blackouts. You may not be able to stay cool in the summer, you may not be able to stay warm in the winter. And not only is it just losing power, but also the power that you get is going to be so ridiculously priced, it's going to cost a lot more for you to pay for it than it is for them to generate it, because there's just not enough to go around. And national security-wise, a fragile power grid not only endangers people's lives, but these AI data centers are becoming basically weapons of war. If your country can't power your data centers and your AI attackers and hackers, they won't be able to defend the United States against foreign AI attacks on our power grid, on our infrastructure and all the important things. Without change, the crisis will worsen as AI demand grows, but yet the power grid doesn't. So what can we do about it? One, well, we should be demanding change. We should be yelling at our politicians and also our power grid operators that they need to be building more power plants, and they need to be building stable power plants and grid updates. We need to get rid of these stupid green policies because they're just absolutely damaging the U.S. power grid and are going to be putting people's lives at risk. So, talk about saving the planet, but we need to talk about saving lives, and we need to talk about saving America. Next thing you can do, instead of not just yelling at people and trying to raise awareness, but rather also invest in backup power. Generators. Now, as much as I hate solar on the big power grid, solar is the most cost-effective way for you to build backup power for your own home. So you need batteries with the solar, but a solar generator with power power panels, solar-powered panels, right? That will charge up the battery pack, which can then charge up your phones, charge up the things that you need, and give you the power that you need to run your home or run some of the things in your home, the critical items in your home. And you can get into that relatively cheaply. Solar panels can be had for $50, $60 per 100 watts if you get good deals on like Amazon. But then you need a battery pack. You're now looking at about 50 cents per watt hour, and that's like how much power you actually have in it. You won't be able to run everything off those units unless you get the more deluxe high-powered units. I'll put a couple options that are cheap budget ways of getting into that down in the pinned comment down below, but hopefully those will help you. Also, you need to be, not just generating more power, but also building your home and your lifestyle in such a way that you don't need power, right? The more things that you can do without power means less demand that you need for your emergency power, right? So if you can wash your own clothes at home, then you don't need to run your washer and dryer. If you can, your dryer, like who here dries your clothes outside with the sun and wind? I mean, that's the most cost-effective way to dry your clothes, right? I use my dryer just for things that I need to make sure that aren't wrinkled, right? Anyway, in addition to that, not only that, but to also stockpile things that don't need energy. So like if you have food stored up, store some food that doesn't require you to have electricity or power in order to cook it, right? Especially for those of you who have electric ranges and you don't have gas. All right, friends, those are some of the tips and tricks out there. Let me know your experiences with power outages and how you're prepared down in the down in the comments down below. But thanks so much for joining with us today. Hopefully this was useful and helpful to you. We got max generation alerts going out there, and grid instability is growing by the day. All right, friends, thanks so much for joining with us. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up there. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report out.